Picture this. You're crawling through a pitch-black tunnel, so tight your shoulders scrape the walls with every movement. Your headlamp flickers once, then twice. Behind you, the passage you just squeezed through seems impossibly narrow. Ahead, complete darkness. And then you realize something that makes your blood run cold. You have no idea which way leads back to the surface. Welcome to the absolute worst nightmare scenarios that can unfold in the twisted maze-like caves beneath our feet. These aren't your typical tourist cave experiences with guided walkways and safety rails. These are the raw, unforgiving underground labyrinths, where experienced cavers have found themselves trapped in situations so terrifying they defy belief. What I'm about to share with you are 3 real cases where ordinary people entered caves and became victims of geology's cruelest tricks. These stories will make you question everything you think you know about underground exploration. And honestly, they might make you never want to go near a cave entrance again. Let's start with what happened to Chris Molino on what should have been a simple family outing in Washington state. Chris wasn't some reckless thrill-seeker. He was a 36-year-old experienced caver who had explored lava tubes for years. He'd done his homework, programming his GPS, studying online cave maps, packing the right gear. Everything seemed perfect that clear May morning in 2003. But caves don't care about your preparation. Chris led his family to what he thought was the correct entrance, a dark opening in the forest floor that felt colder than the surrounding air. Something seemed off about the location, but it was close enough to his research that he decided to scout ahead. That single decision would trap him in a geological prison for the next 5 hours. The cave swallowed him immediately. 100 feet in, he hit a dead end with only a tight crawlway to continue. Following his mental map, he squeezed through, emerged into a larger passage, and turned left toward what should have been the main chamber. But the passage kept going, and going, until he reached a collapsed section that definitely wasn't on any map. Here's where the cave revealed its first cruel trick. Chris found himself sealed in by cave-ins on both sides. No entrance behind him, no exit ahead. But the truly diabolical part was yet to come. Testing his route by scratching an X in the dirt, Chris walked what he thought was a straight line for 400 paces. Then he found himself back at the same X. He had walked in a complete circle without realizing it. The cave had created a perfect loop with no visible exit, a geological trap that could hold him forever. For 5 agonizing hours, Chris circled this underground prison. His headlamp dimmed, his breathing became labored, and the metallic taste of panic filled his mouth. The cave walls seemed to shift and tilt as exhaustion played tricks on his mind. At one point, he collapsed to his knees, too dizzy to stand, digging frantically at the dirt floor with his bare hands. The psychological torture was as brutal as the physical trap. Every circuit reminded him that his family waited above with no way to reach them. The car keys in his pocket felt like anchors, weighing down his hope of ever seeing daylight again. Just when his situation seemed hopeless, Chris noticed a subtle shadow beneath a rock formation, a hidden crawlway so small he had missed it multiple times. Dropping flat, he squeezed through, scraping his elbows raw against stone, until he finally recognized the original entrance passage. He stumbled into the late afternoon sun, blinking and gasping like someone returning from the dead. But Chris's ordeal pales in comparison to what happened to a group of Boy Scouts in Florida just months later. On December 27, 2003, 10 people entered Boy Scout Cave, 8 teenagers and 2 adult counselors. The counselors, citing their size, decided to wait outside while the boys explored alone. This decision would nearly cost 2 young lives. Michael Shiro, 15, and Javik Henderson, 16, led the group deep into the cave's notorious tight passages. Everything seemed manageable until they reached a section called the hairpin curve, a brutal sharp bend, barely wide enough for a single person to squeeze through. Michael went first, his body scraping against jagged limestone, as he twisted through the impossible angle. Henderson followed, but halfway through, the cave claimed him. His body became wedged so tightly between the rocks that he couldn't move forward or backward. Sharp stones pressed into his ribs, and panic began to set in. Michael tried to help, crawling back into the confined space, but the situation only got worse. The cramped position, the cold limestone, and the physical strain quickly drained their energy. Michael's vision blurred, his muscles gave out, and he collapsed unconscious in the narrow passage. Now Henderson was truly alone, trapped and screaming for help, while his friend lay motionless nearby. His voice echoed hollowly through the rock, but in the wider tunnels, the other boys could only hear fragments of his terror. Their flashlights began to flicker, and fear spread that they were running out of oxygen. Faced with an impossible choice, the remaining boys made a heartbreaking decision. They abandoned their friends and fled to the surface. Outside, the counselors realized their mistake too late. One had even lit a fire near the entrance, unknowingly creating the very oxygen depletion the boys feared. Emergency rescue teams arrived within the hour, but getting to Henderson and Michael meant crawling through the same brutal passages that had trapped them. When rescuers finally reached the hairpin curve, they found Henderson conscious but fading, his body trembling from cold and exhaustion. Michael lay ahead of him, unconscious and barely breathing. The rescue became a race against hypothermia and time. Using chisels and incredible patience, the team slowly widened the passage around Henderson. Every strike of metal on stone echoed like a heartbeat through the cave. After more than an hour of painstaking work, Henderson was freed crying, frozen but alive. Michael's extraction was even more desperate. His body temperature had dropped dangerously low, his pulse barely detectable. It took another 2 hours of careful chiseling and maneuvering to free him. Both boys were rushed to the hospital, suffering from severe hypothermia. Michael remained unconscious for nearly 24 hours, suspended between life and death. But perhaps the most harrowing cave entrapment of all happened at Keyhole Cave in 1998, where Craig Douglas would spend 43 hours trapped in a space so tight he could barely breathe. Craig and his friends had visited Keyhole Cave before, but turned back early. This time, they were determined to reach the bottom, 113 feet below the surface. The cave was known for its challenging passages, tight, twisting tunnels that required constant crawling and squeezing. At the very end of the cave system lay Paul's Pipe, a 1-foot-high crawl leading to an 8-foot vertical drop. Craig took the lead, flattening himself and crawling forward through the narrow tube. The stone pressed into his ribs and shoulders as he advanced, using only his legs for propulsion. Reaching the edge of the pit, Craig extended his legs downward, searching for footing. His left foot caught between rocks and became pinched. As he tried to free it, his right knee jammed between 2 slabs of bedrock. A sudden sharp pressure locked his knee in place, immediate, intense and unrelenting. Any movement made the pain worse and deepened his entrapment. Craig's upper body angled downward toward the pit, supported only by his trapped leg. He was stuck in a position that grew more dangerous with every passing hour. His friends tried everything they could reach him, but the space was too confined for effective leverage. After 5 hours, they called for rescue, but Craig's ordeal was just beginning. The first rescue teams arrived and assessed the situation: visible swelling, restricted blood flow, and a trapped position that defied easy extraction. They tried pulling, repositioning, and lubricants like water and vegetable oil. Nothing worked. The rock held Craig's knee like a vise. As hours turned into a full day, hypothermia became a serious threat. The cold stone beneath Craig sapped his body heat, despite space blankets and heat guns powered by electrical lines run from the surface. Oxygen levels dropped to dangerous levels, requiring a ventilation system to pump fresh air through hoses. More than 30 hours had passed. Craig's circulation was nearly gone. His leg had turned dark, and sensation had diminished to constant, severe throbbing. Rescue teams considered breaking his leg as a last resort, but decided instead to chisel away the surrounding rock. Air chisels and hand drills worked in millimeter increments. Only one person could work at a time in the confined space of Paul's pipe. The drilling continued in shifts, slowly reducing the rock that held Craig prisoner. Craig's body temperature dropped again, his responses slowed, and he could no longer speak coherently. He required constant prompting to remain conscious. In a desperate final effort, rescuers passed the drill to Craig himself for the areas they couldn't reach. With limited strength and mobility, Craig managed to apply the drill to the remaining obstruction. His body shook with effort as vibrations shot through his arms and skull. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the rock shifted. With one last pull, his leg came free. It was 8:30 p.m. on Sunday, over 30 hours after he became trapped. Craig's leg was severely damaged, discolored, and unable to bear weight. The extraction took another 8 hours as Craig crawled through the same passages that had brought him into this nightmare. At 9:15 a.m. on Monday, Craig emerged at the surface after 43 hours underground. He was immediately transported to a hospital where emergency surgery saved his leg, though recovery would take months with lasting damage. These 3 cases reveal the most terrifying truth about cave exploration. The underground world operates by its own rules, and those rules can change in an instant. Experience, preparation, and caution mean nothing when geology decides to close its fist around you. The caves in these stories, the looping lava tube, Boy Scout Cave's hairpin curve, and Keyhole Cave's Paul's pipe, still exist today. They're still claiming victims who underestimate their power to transform a simple adventure into a fight for survival. What makes these stories so haunting isn't just the physical trauma, but the psychological torture of being held captive by the earth itself. Imagine knowing that millions of tons of rock surround you, that your freedom depends on moving through spaces barely wider than your body, and that one wrong turn or unlucky shift could seal your fate forever. The next time you see a cave entrance, remember these stories. Remember Chris walking in circles for 5 hours, convinced he would never see his family again. Remember Henderson and Michael, trapped in the hairpin curve, as hypothermia slowly shut down their bodies. Remember Craig, drilling his own path to freedom after nearly 2 days of imprisonment. Because in the underground world, the only guarantee is that there are no guarantees, and sometimes the maze finds you long before you find your way out.